have you ever played a game that really tries to gamify social rules? Do you think that social rules need gamification, or do you think that making a more social game is better than a more combat focused one? Let's talk about all of that.
A lot of the draw to L5R, I think, is not just in like the combat aspects or the militaristic aspects of Samurai, like as a fighting game, because you can get that kind of feel in other games. You can play D&D and they have exhaustive amounts of combat rules and techniques and combos and all this stuff, strategies. But in L5R, they offer you it's not the best setup, but for a social dynamics, right? A lot of games fail in that social arena, and I think L5R Fantasy Flight didn't deliver perfectly on that feeling, but they tried to kind of codify a way to handle social encounters. And I think a lot of game systems fail so hard in not delivering more mechanics that support playstyles that are not just I go and I beat something up with a stick. It's more like
what's great about the L5R world is that it has a lot of politics to it. And these politics are codified within etiquette and how one talks to each other, and even your social standing in life. So it's all baked right in. So it's really easy to just make a political focused
game. Yeah.
And
you could go through an L5R game with a set of characters and not have combat for multiple sessions, maybe even a whole campaign leg, an act. And it would feel just as like intense and pressure filled and that like it might even feel more tense in certain places because you have this kind of inherent buildup of pressure from different social standings, how you're approaching it, what you can actually accomplish and what you can't accomplish. That allows for a lot of different like avenues of storytelling that you don't get in a lot of other game systems. And L5R originally, back in the day of the older editions of L5R, kind of capitalized on that idea that we're going to make a space in this role-playing game in the rules inherent to how you play that really hammer home a focus on how social etiquette and social dynamics come into play.
The original creator,
I feel like a lot of systems need that kind of support in there.
The original creator, John Wick, really wanted to put an emphasis on that kind of space which didn't exist in RPGs. I mean, a little bit with World of Darkness.
Yeah, World of Darkness was about the only thing you could get that was even close to having something.
So he wanted to make a space that wasn't just dark horror where you could do this. He did it with L5R, and he did it again with 7C.
7C, yeah, 7C. The 7C did it kind of even better because that was a bigger focus on that.
There were actual like crunchy dynamics. Rules in the game for doing social
L5R
stuff.
L5R had some light stuff, some light social rules, but they expanded on it more and more the more additions they got through. But yeah, the 7C just did it so fantastically of like, because it took away the bounds of being a samurai and having this kind of higher order social etiquette and made it like much more swashbuckly, much more open. So you could like really have these flamboyant out there characters that are really social and capable of doing so much more. Really, and I like that. I love it. I love that. That's the area that really
we really need to do another 7C game on the channel sometime.
I agree. I love it. I introduced Sasha to it in at Gen Con, and she was like really into it, but she didn't really like the game master that we had at Gen Con necessarily because it felt very like rushed. It was like we have 2 hours, so I'm just gonna like really push you guys forward through this stuff and not let you really explore or like see the visual play space. But in an actual campaign, I think Sasha would go nuts for it, and it's one of my favorite games, so I would love it. Like, I'm a fan of both first and second edition 7C. I know people were like upset about second edition 7C. I love it. I think it's great.
I think second edition is perfectly fine. Sebastian, what do you think about the social dynamics in L5R? What part of L5R really draws you to it? Where's your focus there?
I have to wholeheartedly agree with Tarek. I also was firstly introduced to basically social dynamics in a role-playing game before, right? Like this was, so the L5R 5th edition was my first introduction basically to it. And basically gamification, this social interaction was really a huge part that drew me to that actually made social interactions interesting in the game, right? Because usually players also tend to avoid it at all, right? I mean, combat is so much more fun in other games that you totally forget about, like, why should I even do something like this?
Talk to people, yeah.
The only thing that I have a little problem with is that it's a little bit convoluted in L5R, right? Especially in the Fantasy Flight version, right? Like I think like there's so many good intentions in right. I really can see basically what they were thinking when they did all these implementations, but there needed to be a second streamlining of everything, right? Like, okay, we have to get on a higher flight level and look at this again, right? And then see what we can strip away. And that never happened, I guess.
Oh yeah, and the fact that it is super convoluted when you have to get into combat rounds in a conceptual space, you have to get into combat rounds to do your social interactions. I think like older editions of L5R let it be more freeform, and they had looser rules in terms of like there weren't techniques that were social in a sense and let you do that. Instead, there were school abilities that would allow you to get special bonuses during social interactions, and they just encouraged social interactions and had like rules set up to how social interactions are supposed to kind of evolve. But they left a lot more to the GM. The GM had to really be good at managing a social encounter, otherwise it would just kind of fall apart. And I think Fantasy Flight pushed too far in that realm to say, well, we can't just leave it up to the GM's interpretation. We need some more crunchiness around this so that it feels easier to manage for a GM, but it does the exact opposite. It makes new players feel very intimidated about trying to get involved in that. I think Corey came up with a really nice, elegant solution for that of like, let's strip back some of the like social encounter dynamics and let social interaction play out. And then when it comes to the point where you're having to do like social goals inside of a social, like an intrigue scene, for instance, now how do we incorporate those kind of rules in a way that will make it feel like you're getting progress in your social encounter and less like you have to sit here and wait for your initiative turn to actually go and say something or do something.
And I think also it changes a little bit the dynamic of telling a story, right? So instead of, having these long monologues and explaining them the story and the backstory, right? The players are much more, they have to figure it out yourself through basically social interaction, right? They have to investigate. They have to, what are the dynamics between the parties in the game and so forth, right? And it makes it much more interesting than just like a GM saying, yeah, okay, there's this party, and now they're having a conflict and you're sitting at a table, right? And suddenly someone is mad about something, right?
Yeah, screaming, yeah.
I have an idea. I've had ideas for like years now how to make a good social game, and they're very much based on my interactions with Legend of the Five Rings, 1st to 4th edition. The first one is intimidation. There's intimidation in all role-playing games, and they don't work very well, right? And for me, when you intimidate somebody and you succeed, there should be 2 options that a person should be able to do at that point if you succeed at an intimidation. That character can either do what the intimidator wants them to do or take a penalty. Get out of my way, this is my drink. You can either do what he says and stand down, or now you're shaken and you get a penalty for the next couple rounds or the rest of the scene because your character is shaken. In L5R, it's great. They have strife, and you can just say, oh, do this or take strife. And that can work for intimidation, can work for a lot of other things too, like charming and that sort of thing. Another thing is gaining information. You can ask the game master, hey, if I say this or ask about this, what kind of response should I be expected to get? And that could be like more of like an awareness roll. You're sizing somebody up, right? If I give them a rose, would they be mad about that? Would they be indifferent to it? Would they really like that and it would ingratiate them to me? This is the kind of thing that would help in these social encounters, especially with a lot of players who just are frozen and they don't know what to do. Now they can ask before making these, putting themselves out there. And then you roll your etiquette or you roll your conversation or whatever and trying to figure this out. There's a technique that the Yasky have in older editions where they can figure out exactly what you need. They'll roll some dice and go, this person really loves good sushi. So I'm going to hook this guy up with good sushi and they're going to be my friend. And I thought that was an amazing technique that really works well, right?
Yeah, well implemented too.
So these are the kinds of rules I would put in my own role-playing game to make social encounters a little more dynamic, rather than just turning it into rounds and making you roll, oh, I charm this turn, oh, I intimidate this turn.
There are different approaches, in my opinion, to how you can manage social and intrigue in games. And there's been a few different game systems that I've played that had interesting rules around this. Pathfinder First Edition, which isn't a game that I think most people would think of social engagement in. It's not one that first comes to mind. But they implemented a faction system that allowed you to have like a broad set of influence with a group of individuals, get benefits from them, and also set up like, how do you influence people in a conversation if you're holding over, and what approach would most likely work. So if you wanted to do diplomacy, if you wanted to do intimidation, if you wanted to do like coercion, then there's different approaches that you could take, and that would have basically based on your NPC and what their factions are, what their goals are, that might set a DC or give you more like ability to influence that person one way or another, which is nice. Altogether, with a good GM, you can make a really engaging system there where you have factions, the world feels more alive, you have benefits for having dealt with individuals in a particular way, made allies or enemies out of them, and then grown in your faction or in other factions.
Now you have another page of your character sheet that has different organizations and your rating within those organizations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that lets you like feel like the world is a really large and living place, right? Where the world is interacting and reacting to you.
I was writing a game with kind of that thing in mind, but you have like your rank in whatever organization you're in, and within that organization you can get stuff depending on that rank. But if you go to an outside group and you try to use your rank against them, you'd have they understand that you're powerful and you got friends, but you would be like at a penalty. Like they would see you 1 to 2 ranks lower because you're not part of that group, yet you do have prestige within society, and that matters.
The problem then comes into in Paizo, it was very difficult. It wasn't very crunchy to go and like have a social encounter, right? You just rolled your diplomacy, you rolled your, it's a basic dice rolling kind of system, and that's what really held it over. And I think social encounters need to have an element of, well, let's do the role play side of things, right? In D&D, it's very difficult because you're like, I don't know how to socially interact with people. I'm a nerd. It's not my forte. So instead, let me roll a die that will determine how well my argument is, and then I do maybe some light role play to try to fill in the gaps there. Where I think a lot of other systems kind of put the onus on you to be social in the moment, be able to like talk through and reason through what your approach is, how you're trying to role play in that scenario, and that lends itself to people who are much more experienced role players who like that kind of narrative aspect of the game and are willing to kind of engage.
I've heard people argue that you shouldn't even have social stats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
there's a camp that believes that, right? That is like, I don't need to have, my character has the social abilities. I don't need to have the social abilities. I shouldn't have to worry about this.
That's the entire other direction. Like, why do I have to talk? My character is way different than me. I can just roll a die, which is bad. But also the other side is,
we don't need social interaction at all, or dice at all, because I can just social.
I can just talk.
I can social my way through this plastic bag.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, we're not playing Amp-Guard, so I need the fighting characteristics, but, Amp-Guard is like kind of hitting people with fake swords out in the woods. It's a fun time, actually, if you've never done it.
Super fun.
It is super fun. I'm making it sound dorky, but it's fun. But yeah, they don't have, if you're playing Amp-Guard, they don't have social stats. Last time I checked. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think
it's been a long time.
But yeah, so there's two camps in this area. I think a midpoint is what you need. You need some crunchy rules around it so that you can support people who aren't as great at doing the narrative role play aspect. But we're playing role-playing games, right? At a certain point, people evolve into wanting that interaction more, that role, the ability to play a role actually, and stand in for their character and speak on the subject that you've been touching on throughout the entire campaign or whatever. So being able to have a narrative aspect where you can do some role play and then have some crunch around giving an effect to that role play, making that really hammer home, maybe giving bonuses to people who are doing effective role play.
I don't like that either.
Taking into consideration your approach, maybe taking into consideration your like the character that you're dealing with, and they should have kind of a mechanism for judging whether or not they get influenced by the way that you're speaking to them. I think L5R tried to do that in a sense, and I don't think I've found a system really that works as well as I'd like it to, but I mean, L5R tries pretty hard to get that right.
Here's the thing with giving people bonuses based on roleplay. Somebody at the table is going to be bad at that. And even if they play a social character, they're going to try their best, but I don't think they'll ever rise to the point of getting that bonus from roleplay, which is not fair.
I think when I say that, you're taking it as if you're exceptionally good at role playing, you get a bonus. But what I mean is, if you are putting the effort in, like, I don't care if you're really bad at talking. You could have a speech impediment and be terrified of talking and say like 4 words. But as long as you're putting that effort in to like get your point across or explain how your approach is coming, you should get a bonus based on saying that. Like, okay, I am approaching this guy. He's been cagey for a while. He seems to distrust us. So I'm going to go in and try to charm him, let him like soothe his worries. And I might say a couple words into that approach of like, hey, I understand that this is a foreign place for you and that you're not really comfortable with us. How can I help to make this transition easier for you?
We're talking about situational bonuses then. We're talking about I have done a little bit of homework and now I'm going to give myself a situational bonus to that should work in social situations as well as fighting situations.
Exactly, because those are things that you would get bonuses for in a lot of systems designed around combat, but they're not things that they ever really incorporate into the rule system for social interaction. And I think that that's a really like niche play space that a lot of people don't ever get to explore because game systems kind of shy away from it.
They do.
I feel like that's an inaccurate place to be. You should lean into that a little more. Our hobby is social intrinsically. We're always talking to each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Explaining things that we're doing in character, wanting to like, build it up and make that part of the role-playing experience from the social aspect.
Make a character, and the only abilities you get are how hard you're going to hit a person and what happens when you hit them. And
yeah, let's say you're playing a sorcerer who's like your charisma based. You get no abilities for social encounters, but you can use your charisma to bash a fucking goblin 10 times more. Like
walk up to an NPC trying to sell you bread. What do? Oh, I punch him and take his bread because that's what's on my. That is how I interact with people. That's what my character sheet says.
Exactly. I'm really good at using my charisma to blast him with a spell.
Yeah,
so
hit him with an Eldritch Blast. Bang.
I have a 20 charisma, so I should be able to talk my way through the situation, but I have no rules for doing that. So I'm gonna blast him instead and then take what he's got. Like,
and then you're like,
if it encouraged you a little more.
There are rules to doing that. I don't see them anywhere in this book. Well, they're in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so you don't get to see them. I get to see them.
Yeah. Also, you only have like three skills on your character sheet that might be able to work here in this situation, and you've never had to use them before.
Oh,
so
go back to first edition and second edition. The skills, what be them?
Everywhere. Yeah, exactly.